So I'm John Paul, developer at Nautic Labs. I'll be taking you through Flutter framework, the basics, what I think is important for a learner to know and how it works, so that you can have an idea of the technology. So Flutter is an open source framework that was created by Google. The first version was launched in 2018. Currently on the second version that was launched in 2021, March. So as I said, it's developed by Google. It uses also a relatively new language called Dart by Google as well. So Flutter was developed mainly to help small and mid-sized companies. In normal circumstances, you'd have to create Android apps using Java language, frameworks that are based on Java language. And for iOS, you have to use frameworks that are based on Objective-C or Swift language. So that means in usual circumstances, you have to have either two developers, one good at Swift and one good at Java, so that you can have applications that will work on both iOS and Android. Either have two developers or one who's good at both. That meant you have to have two code bases, one for Java, one for Objective-C. So Flutter tries to get rid of this complexity by creating a framework that has one code base that will work on both iOS and Android platforms. Hope you get still there. So how it works, it renders a UI. You just create widgets that renders the UI on the operating system instead of writing code in native, like maybe using Java. So you just create the language, just creates widgets that are drawn on the screen. So that's why both iOS and Android devices understand that. So it comes with widgets. Widgets, it's all about widgets. A specific widget does something specific. Maybe if you want to have maybe a form, if you write form, it will just draw a widget. That's how Flutter works. So I'll go through the features of Flutter. They'll overlap with some of the advantages. So when I go to advantages, just know some of the features are still advantages, so that's why they overlap. It's a modern and reactive framework. It uses that programming language that is very easy to learn. That is similar to, from my experience, it's very similar to JavaScript, very, very similar to JavaScript. It has a very beautiful interface that as you'll see when you go to the code, to the output of the code. It has a very huge widget catalog. So the widgets help you do something that would have usually needed maybe a very long list of code. It's done with a single widget. With Flutter, you run the same UI for several platforms, both iOS and Android. It is very high performance compared to something like React Native, which almost does the same job. But for Flutter, it's very high. It's very high in performance. We go to the advantages. So Dart, the language used in Flutter, has a very large heap of software packages, which lets you extend several capabilities to your application. So I was saying, when you're using Flutter, things have been abstracted. You can do something that would have taken someone using Java or Objective-C a very long time using a single widget. As I said earlier, you just use one code base for both iOS and Android platforms, so you don't have to maintain and write maybe two test cases for the Android and for just one code base, and it's managed by one engineer. As I say, it needs less assessing because of a single code base. It's very simple. You'll see once you understand the main classes that are used, it's very, very simple. It offers hot reload. Hot reload is a feature that allows you to see the progress you're making as you code. I'll show you, there's a button when you just press it, it reloads and makes this latest change is rendered on the application. Some of the disadvantages of Flutter, it's coded using Dart, which is a relatively new language. You have to learn it to be able to use Flutter. So for most modern frameworks, the logic and the UI are visually separated. But Flutter does the opposite. It combines both logic and UI all under one file. To overcome this, what you can do is arrange your files according to maybe what they relate to. If they are API files, you can have them under the API folder, so it will be easier to know where they are, because there is no separating logic. Maybe in web in how can I explain this? Maybe if you are just normally, if you're writing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript without using a framework, you'll have three files: one for HTML, one for CSS, one for JavaScript. But in Dart and Flutter, just under one file, everything: the styling, the text that's usually in HTML, the what does JavaScript do, the movement, all those things are under one file. So Flutter is among many other frameworks. So it's developers are having a hard time choosing the right development tools. So we go to the practical part. That's creating a simple Flutter app. So I'll move to VS Code for this. I'll create a new window. So there are several dependencies that you need to have before you can use Flutter. These are present in the Flutter website. There's a very clear guidance on what you need to do to be able to develop in Flutter. What you need to install, you need to have, for Android, you need to have Android Studio SDK. That's a software development kit for Android. You need, for iOS apps, you need to have something called Xcode. Xcode allows you to build applications for iPhones, for MacBooks, and for what are those tablets for iOS called? For all Apple related, for all macOS related products, you can use Xcode to build them. So you have to have those installed first before you use it. After you have those installed, you'll write, let me go to the terminal. Yes, you write this to get all the dependencies that need to be installed. This usually checks what's there and what you need to add. Yeah. So you write Flutter Doctor to check what is needed to be able to develop in Flutter. This checks all this, so it tells you what you need to have and how to install it. In case you don't have anything, it will just tell you how to install it. So Xcode is for building, developing iOS and macOS related application. Android Studio for Android related. You can also develop for the web. So you need to have Chrome. Yeah, these are the things you need. So to start, you go to, once you have installed everything, you go to View, Command Palette, then Flutter New Project. Then you go to the file where you need to have the application. You can have it here. Maybe create a new folder. Name it Notech Lab. Then that. So it will create. You can list them the application Notech. Name it that. So it's running. It will take a few minutes to create the project, the template that you use when developing. Yeah, this is the template. So this is how the framework looks. The main important files here is maybe this main data file is the main entry point of the application. The main entry point of the application. And this pubspec.yam file is where you have all the dependencies. So like this is the software development kit you're using is called Flutter. The icons you're using is this. You can change, there are several icons, you can choose and change it here. You remove this, you put the one you want. Here you change the version numbers of the dependency you're using. So if you want to have a new dependency, you add it here. Then you run something called Flutter get. So let me run this application. This is the basic application for Flutter when you start developing Flutter. Let me launch it. It will take maybe a minute to launch. As it loads, I can help you go. You can go through this file and I'll help you understand what most of them mean. So here are where the Android files are saved. Here is where the iOS files are saved. The lib is where you have most of the files, your file. So maybe if you want to create maybe a login page, you have a new folder. You can name it pages or anything. You can name it any pages. Then let's have a file. We'll name it login. That. Let's wait for the application to finish building them. Let's rerun this. First build usually takes time, so sorry about that. Should be done now. So this is the demo app from Flutter. So I was telling you earlier, it combines both UI and logic in one file. So that I'm going to take you through creating a basic login page and the most important classes in Flutter. I'd already created a file earlier on, but you can do it. I can just copy paste the code I had. This. So as I was telling you, this pubspec.yam file has all the dependencies. So for example, this email validator is from Flutter. So it's from data and Flutter. So if you have it, you don't need to have the logic for validating emails. Just use it. You just include it as a validator. Let me show you it is. Well, here under text form field, this is why you text form field is like a form in web development. So if you have the validator, just select email validator, and it will automatically know what it needs to check to make sure the user has put in a correct email. Then when you add it as a dependency, it should be added somewhere here in this file. You see it has been added here. So you have the version. Maybe when there's a new version that checks something new, you can update it. You just update it here. All the dependencies will be added here. Let me change. I'll explain all this in a minute. So this is the basic login page. I'll use this as a way to help me explain the basic classes that I use in Flutter. Go back to my presentation. So yeah, I was going through this. You just invoked. I was showing you how to set up a new Flutter app. We've done this. Then you selected new project, Flutter new project. You selected the application. You added an application. The directory where you want our project to be saved. We created the project name. We saved it as Notec. We waited for the project configuration to complete and then made that file to appear. So next is Flutter architecture. So in Flutter, as I said earlier, we mainly use widgets. I'll explain what widgets are shortly. And it's formed, it's hierarchy based. Hierarchy based means, let me use this as a way to explain what hierarchy means. You have to know it's relating to parent and child, just like in web development. So here, this will be the parent, the main parent, the one that encompasses all this, that has this, and these three parts. So this is the parent. Then you go to these are the children, this, and this will be children. Then you go to this can also act as a parent, and this will be a child. This writing here will be a child. When you go to this section here, you'll also have a parent that will have these three sections. You can divide it into three. Then you go to this section, there's also parent and child. So the main thing will be the parent, then you'll have children here, here. I hope you understand what it means. That's what you mean by hierarchy based. You know what encompasses what. So in, like, for example, in our application, we'll have one main parent that has everything. Then another parent will have, this will be the children, this sign-in text, and this form, and this button. To have four children, this sign-in text, these two forms, this button, and this text. So you need to, let me go back to the code and explain how it's done in the code. So this is the code for that page. You start by, the main thing is you need to decide whether your page will be a stateful or a stateless widget. A stateful widget means the UI responds to the input by the user. For example, if you press sign in, you need the UI to change according to that, you pressing that button. So that you need, for such a page, you need to extend a stateful widget. For a page maybe that involves text that you're just reading through, the user input does not affect how the UI looks. So you create something called a stateless widget. After that, you go to the widget builder. This is what creates this page. What do you need it to return? You can either return a container or a scaffold. A container would be, maybe you're creating maybe a field, a form. You can create maybe a specific form that you will use it. You want your form to have several things. You need it to have color, you need it to have something like that. So there you will be returning a container. But if you want to return a page, in Flutter we call it a scaffold. So a scaffold has several things. A scaffold is this page. Once you have return a scaffold, you can have several sub parts. Maybe if you have an up bar, in Flutter we call it an up bar. So if you want to have several sections, like an up bar, then bottom up bar, such things, you need to return a scaffold. So in a scaffold, there are several parts. Here is the up bar. From the up bar up to the end of the scaffold is called a body. Then at the bottom, we have a bottom nav bar. So that's why we return a scaffold. So under the scaffold, we give it, this is like CSS, we give it a background color, theme of context. This will take, here, this is done to, so that you don't have to keep on giving a specific color. From the main data file, you can just, you can choose the color you want your application to have. For example, we choose green. So this is what we call hot reload. You can see the changes in real time. So the widgets I was telling you about that make it easy for, like, this primary search is a widget. It's under its creation, it has several parts that it will affect, so that it can give your application a specific theme. So it's already been developed. You don't need to come and write this again. You just give it the color you want, and it will just change several parts of your UI so that your application have that theme. Go back to the page. So you say return a scaffold. A scaffold will have several parts. You can add an up bar if you want. For example, I said you can have an up bar. Yeah. We can then have a container. Here we have the body. These are just styling. This is padding, just like in web development. It gives the side a space all around of 20 mm. Let me describe how hierarchy works under the container. So we have three things we need to consider. There's a child, there's a column, and there's children. So let me go back to this and explain. For example, if you want to create a UI that looks like this, we'll first return a scaffold. A scaffold will encompass everything. Then on the scaffold, we'll have maybe an app bar. An app bar will be this section here. Then we'll have after the app bar, we'll return a container here. The container will have maybe something called a sized box. Not a sized box. You can just have a container, and a container will have text. Let me show an example here. For example, here we have a child that has a text of signing. So on the UI, this looks. So we're trying to create this. We'll have a container, a container or a child. If it's you have a container and a child, the child will have a text under it, and the text just keep putting the string frequently used classes. Then after that, we need to have another child that has these three sections. So if you want to have several sections, you give the child a property of row or column. If they're arranged vertically, you give it a property of column. If they're arranged horizontally, you give it a property of row. So an example is here. So here we have the body container, then the child, you're given property of column because we want to, they're arranged vertically. Hope you understand. So this child, you've given it a property of column. When you want to have several things under that child, we give it a property of children. So this is let me repeat, this is the scaffold, and that thing is the scaffold. Under the scaffold, we have bodies from here to here. Then under the body, we have a child. The child, or you can either have a child or a container. If you use a container, if you want to have, you want to have all your widgets share some properties. If they don't, you don't need to share some properties, there's no need of using a container. So under the child, we give it a property of column so that they can be arranged in this way. If you give it a property of row, they would have been arranged. What is it called? If it's column, they're arranged vertically. If it's row, they're arranged vertically, horizontally. Yeah. So back to the code. The child, you give it a property of column so that they're arranged vertically. Then these are just CSS to have them on the center. You can put them left or right, so that if you put them left, they'll be on the left side. If you put them right, they'll be on the right side of the page. Then we go to column, and a column you want to have several children, several subparts. You want to have this, and this. So they are called children. So that's why you have these children here. So the first thing is a text of signing is here. Next, these are just styles for the text. Next, you have a sized box. A sized box can be either, you give it either a property of height or width. So height 60 is the distance between this signing text and this form. You can increase to see how it changes. You can have maybe 100 to see the difference. So we hot reload it. You see there's a difference. You can reduce it to maybe 1 to see the difference. You see that's how it reacts. The next child is a form. This form that takes in the user input. So under that form, you want them to be arranged. You have two parts that you want them to be arranged vertically. So you give it property of column so that the children of this child will be arranged vertically. So you give it a property of column. If you give it a property of row, it will be arranged in that. Yes, let me show you the example. There's a problem because it will exceed the spacing I've given, so I'll have to change a lot of things. Let me just do it. But I hope you understand. I'll have to change a lot for it to work because I've given these things size, so they can't be arranged horizontally because of the size. So, but I hope if you want them to be arranged horizontally, just give it property of row. So the children, you have the first text form field. Text form field is like a form in web development where the user inputs their information. I was telling you the widgets that are built in, maybe the validator, the one you imported under dependencies, email validator. It's an example of validator. So in this form field, you want a validator that checks the user has put in a valid email. So Flutter has its own checker. That's called an email validator. It's shipped with Flutter. So it will just check if the email is valid, and it will display this when the email does not pass the checks of the validator. These are just CSS, like CSS. These are just decorational to decorate how the box looks, the form looks. Next, we put a size box of height 20. That's to give it this distance from enter email to this. Then it's also just tells the application to have the input to only one line. Obscure test just tells the application to hide the password when you're writing. If you put it false, do not hide. If you put it true, it will hide the password. These are just also like CSS. Hint text shows what should be shown here. Maybe. And, I'll back put it. Can see it. Just let me how to load it. Why is not changed? Yeah. Hint text is what it shows you what you need to write. Next, you go to this is a size box. It separates form from this button. This is a button. This button. This is basically how it works. What I was trying to demonstrate is that property of things must be done in hierarchy. You need to understand what will be the parent element, what will be the child element, and maybe have like you can just maybe draw and know what will be under what, and yeah, if they'll be arranged vertically or horizontally. Next, go back to the slides. I was here. Widgets form a composition-based hierarchy. That was what I was explaining. Each widget is located inside its parent and receives context from there. Yeah. So you give the parent a property of either row. This just explains how hierarchy works, and the parent and the child elements, and the properties they inherit from the parent or the child. Framework establishes those two paramount classes. I explained stateful widgets and stateless widgets. So you need to decide whether your widget will be stateful or stateless. That means it will react to the users, maybe with the buttons they press or the text they input. Okay. Next is frequently used classes in Flutter. You have the scaffold. Explain scaffold is the main page. If you return a scaffold, it will render a whole page. Then you can have the sub parts of the page. A container, you put your widgets inside a container so that you can give all your widgets the same properties. Just like in web development, when you have a container and give it some properties, the things that are inside that container inherit those properties. Then another frequently used class in Flutter is the material app. This is the main application. So main data files just use here. Return in either return a container, a scaffold, or a material app. Here you just use it once. So for example, here you're given the material app a title of Flutter demo. So anywhere we put in title, it will just use this. So those are the frequently used classes. So these are a description of the frequently used widgets. Most of this we have used them here on this page. So these are the main things that we use. The scaffold implements the basic material design, visual layout structure. It has the things that I've said earlier, that's the body, the upper, the bottom upper, such things. We have the body. The body is the widget that in the scaffold that starts from the top left, after the upper, if you have an upper, and goes to the bottom of the scaffold. So a child, the widget can have only one child. To lay out multiple children, we need to give the child a property of row or column, so that under that row or column we put in, you will have children, and those children will be arranged according to the property you've given your child. So children are, you have children after you have after you've created a child and given it a property of either row or column, so you can have children. Yeah, so these are row or column sub widgets that are placed inside the children widget. Column specifies the direction of the children widgets. That gives the children will be placed vertically if you give it a property of column. If you same for row, horizontal. Size box is used when you want to have space in between different subparts, maybe different channels. It can be either give it a property of height or width. If you want them to be separated horizontally, you give it a property of width, and you specify the dimensions. Maybe it should be 20 millimeters or something. If you want the size box to separate maybe two containers vertically, you give it, you feed in the vertical dimensions on how those containers separated. Next is a text. Use a text when you want to have some, maybe a string or something displayed. You write text and give it, then you insert the string you want. Container is explained, it contains the widgets and has them inherit the properties. You give the properties, give the container. So yeah, I was supposed to present the code at this point.